There you are, my beautiful people, and welcome back to another thrilling episode of disturbing videos on the internet today. For context, these videos are strictly for entertainment purposes only. Do your own research on everything. I like to do what I call eat the meat and spit out the bones. If something resonates with you, good. Always keep your head on a straight swivel. With that being said, let's dive in. Road rage encounter goes terribly wrong. Let's take a closer look. Aw, man, I know he's mad. I'm shocked he didn't throw the cup. I'm glad he didn't. He had to show some restraint. That probably was his favorite cup. Looks like it keeps his drink hot or cold for extended periods of time. Guy says Scientology trapped him.
They're trying to trap me.
Is that guy like trapped in there? What are you doing?
I'm from Italy. Go make some courses.
Yeah.
And they're trying to trap me.
They're trying to trap you?
I made Corinne. I'm arriving. It's Corinne.
Get out of the parking lot.
Yeah. Who's Corinne? That was literally Toucan. What is going on? I don't know what's going on here. How'd you get Toucan's number?
I'm part of this.
You're part of it?
No,
Did you
I
get a
was,
pickup?
but now I'm not more because my card expired.
Lord.
Expired February 20th.
So what does that card mean?
It's the introduction membership. Can we go a little far from here?
Yeah, hold on.
I don't feel that safe. They're trying to trap.
How evil is that place? What exactly do they have going on inside?
In today's episode of Stuff You Didn't Learn in Sunday School, did you know King Solomon was in the Quran? They called him the Prophet Suleiman, and they have this entire how he received a special ring from the Archangel Michael that allowed him to command and control the jinn. The jinn. We might call those interdimensional beings. And in his book, The Lesser Key of Solomon, that was translated way back, they talk about how these guys are from the earthen plane, the earthen dimension, also called Tartarus. And then these guys are spirits of the air. So spirits of the air and spirits of the earth could be commanded by Solomon and his ring. Now this is allegedly what the ring looked like. Note this symbol here. That symbol has been very misunderstood throughout the years. A lot of people confuse it for the symbol of the House of David. It is not. There is nowhere in the Bible that talks about there being a star for the House of David. But there is a place in the Bible that talks about there being a star on the banner of the house of the Ammonites. You can look that up for yourself as a little Easter egg. That being said, this is allegedly what this ring looked like. And we've already talked a lot about these guys on this channel, Peep the Tiny Castle. These guys were looking for that ring. They were looking for all of Solomon's relics, all of his things that he had that might be magical, and all of his information, like the scrolls and all that. That is part of the reason they did the Crusades to begin with. Now, you know what else happened in the Crusades? The word Baphomet was added to our dictionary. The word Baphomet did not appear in our collective linguistic history until after the Crusades. Isn't that interesting? Some people say they never found the ring, and that they're allegedly still looking for the ring so that they can recontain the jinn that were released during the Crusades. But I personally think somebody already has the ring, and they're using it to do their dirty work. And the reason I think that is because I've read the Lesser Key of Solomon, and I know that a lot of those jinn require things, certain things, dark things. Y'all know what I'm talking about, right? Does this look like the face of someone who knows something about this? I can't help but think about it. Like, this is the face of somebody who has seen way too much. And maybe you're like, oh, well, he just saw those videos of Jeffrey. He just saw him doing these terrible things. Maybe. Or did he see summoning?
But it is interesting. Where exactly is the ring now? And it makes you think about Moses' staff as well. Where's Moses' staff at?
Archaeological evidence confirms the Bible once again. We had Noah's Ark in Turkey. CIA documents found the Ark of the Covenant. AI verified the Shroud of Turin, and now this. In a remote corner of the Dead Sea, something buried for thousands of years is rearing its head, and it's low-key shocking the world. Once dismissed by skeptics as a myth, now standing tall as a pillar of salt are the remnants of the haunting biblical tale of Lot's wife. And the proof that this is the actual pillar from the book of Genesis is slowly becoming undeniable. Now, to the casual, uninformed observer, this column of salt might seem kinda unimpressive, a peculiar geological formation at best. To really understand the significance of what was discovered here, you kinda need to know the story behind it. It starts with a man named Abraham, who's kinda like the OG granddaddy of all major world religions, his descendants forming the family tree of prophets and significant people in the Bible. Well, one day, God tells Abraham that these cities of Sodom and Gomorrah were becoming super evil and corrupt, indulging in idolatry, gluttony, promiscuous immoral behavior, murder, theft, power abuses, pride, and mocking behavior. Basically, modern-day Los Angeles. And yes, if you add a Y to the end of Sodom, that's where that word comes from. So God lets Abraham know that he's going to destroy these cities, raining fire and brimstone on them and burning them to the ground. Abraham thinks it's a great idea, and he's totally on board, except for the fact that his nephew Lot lives there, and turns out he's actually a pretty good guy. Now, God's already 2 steps ahead and lets him know that Lot and his family are actually like the only good people that live there, so he'll keep them safe. He sends down 2 angels that tell Lot to get his family out of the city before God burns it down. And so Lot, his wife, and his daughters flee the city, and God starts raining down literal fire on Sodom and Gomorrah, destroying them and everyone living there. While Lot and his family are leaving, the angels let them know that God also told them to not look back at the burning city. That's their only rule. But Lot's wife is all like, I could take a peek, can't I? Turns around to look at the city and is instantly turned into a pillar of salt while Lot and his daughters take refuge in a cave. That's the story. Leaving Lot's wife frozen in time, with many assuming this to be merely a symbolic story cautioning against longing for a sinful past. But now it seems like we might have real-world evidence that proves it actually happened. The tale of Sodom and Gomorrah is one of a sudden catastrophe so intense it decimated entire populations overnight, and the biblically accurate locations of these cities are said to have been somewhere close to the Dead Sea. For centuries, religious pilgrims from around the world sought to find the remains of the city, claiming it to be hidden deep beneath the layers of salt found at what is known today as Mount Sodom by the Dead Sea, named after the original city. But more recently, forensic scientists and archaeologists began excavating more around the area, and after digging and testing many mineral layers, they uncovered evidence of extreme heat in the soil layers deep beneath, as well as naturally occurring sulfur balls and burnt sediment layers that could not be explained with natural erosion alone, but rather something that would only happen with a sudden onset of intense heat, and there aren't any volcanoes or anything that could cause that in this region, which points to a sudden source of destructive heat that may have fallen from the sky. There are also many unexpected, strange voids and air pockets beneath the surface of Mount Sodom, where it appears that the ground had rapidly collapsed, leading many to believe this actually is the original location of the ancient city of Sodom. And this wouldn't even be the first time that something like this happened. Many ancient cities from the Bible, initially dismissed as mythical sites, have all been found one by one. Cities like Jericho, Hazor, and Nineveh, all mentioned in the Bible, have been discovered hundreds or even thousands of years after they were originally written about. Now, to think all those cities were found and turned out to be real, yet Sodom and Gomorrah were for some reason made up, seems unreasonable. Because right at the edge of Mount Sodom, overlooking towards where the original cities of Sodom and Gomorrah would have been destroyed, a group of researchers found this, an unusual pillar composed of 80% salt, which is exactly what they are claiming to be Lot's wife. And all the evidence they gathered so far sorta proves just that. Found at the southeastern end of the Dead Sea, exactly where Lot and his family would have been fleeing in the region of Zoar. At first glance, it's easy to dismiss as just a mildly interesting geological formation, but further scans revealed internal cavities in the pillar with traces of carbonized organic material, something that had once been alive. Also embedded in the salt near the torso were threads of mineralized fabric sealed beneath crystallized layers. Clothes. Radiocarbon dating of nearby sediment placed the surrounding ash layer at roughly 3,700 years old, exactly the time window scholars associate with the destruction of Sodom. Lab from Jerusalem also confirmed that within the salt pillar were traces of fossilized collagen, a protein only found in organic tissue, which was also verified by multiple other independent labs. And the only way anything like that could have been preserved in a shape like this is through an event that involved extreme heat and a flash explosion. All evidence that highly supports this claim. Naturally, there's a lot of skepticism around this, with geologists claiming that salt formations like these are actually quite common, despite there being none other of this nature in the region. Also noting that it's about 20 meters high, much too tall for a woman, and for all we know, Lot's wife wasn't a giant. But
Yeah, I was about to say, how tall was it? It's 66 feet? 20 meters, 66 feet. That is massive. So she would have to be a giant if that was her location.
Much too tall for a woman, and for all we know, Lot's wife wasn't a giant. But then again, the story does say she was turned into a pillar of salt, not a statue of salt. It could very well be the case that the formed pillar was much taller than her encased in it, with the researchers behind this find even quoted as saying, "We found something that matches the story more closely than we thought was possible." A skeptic mineralogist from Oxford University admitted that whether this actually is Lot's wife or not, it is something the geological world has never documented before. Yet there actually are historic records of this beyond just the Bible as well. Josephus, a 1st century historian, recorded in his work The Antiquities of the Jews that he had seen Lot's wife with his own eyes, writing, "But Lot's wife, continually turning back to view the city as she went from it, was changed into a pillar of salt, for I have seen it, and it remains at this day." An old manuscript from a museum in Italy also writes about a lone figure in the shape of a woman overlooking a destroyed city, with its location being almost exactly where this pillar was found. Historic accounts made thousands of years after the original event, which sort of supports that it might have actually happened. Now, government agencies, the Israeli Antiquities Authority, scientific institutions, and religious organizations alike are all calling for further investigation of the salt pillar, or at the very least, building a preservation dome around it to protect it from the elements, and ideally get more definitive proof of what this really is. But knowing them, they're probably just going to close the area off from the public and deny further investigation, insisting it's to preserve it from damage. They just can't let us have nice things, now can they?
Sorry, but man, if that really was Lot's wife, do you know how quick they would snap that thing off and carry it in the airship so no one else could see it? That's my only issue with it. Do you think that's Lot's wife? Secondly, a lot of people theorize that a lot of this biblical stuff happened here in America. So that really doesn't line up to that theory as well. So let me know your thoughts in the comments below.
King Tut was the king of Memphis at 9 years old, bloodline of David. Pharaohs ruled by bloodline. So they knew a young king like Jesus Christ was coming too. Yes, King Tut did rule Memphis, moved the royal court back to Memphis. Now this Howard Carter, they supposed to have found King Tut in Egypt, right? They supposed to be in Egypt in Africa, right? So this supposed to be Egypt in Africa. This a staged picture, y'all. This stage. This is Mammoth Cave in Kentucky where they really found King Tut. 400-mile long underground cave in Kentucky that we knew nothing about. Largest in the world. And there's a lot of white people that's scared to talk. They told me that they found it, but they scared to talk. Look at that. They found 3,000 mummies there. So check this out. Who is this? In the Mammoth Cave in Kentucky. That's Howard Carter. What is he doing in the Mammoth Cave? Look at this. That's Howard Carter. That's the same guy. And did you know they found King Tut magical eggs in Idaho 3 years before? They supposed to have found King Tut tomb in Egypt.
The markings on this egg was King Tut's high priest signature on one side of the rock and the cartouche of his name on the other. Now keep in mind that they didn't break into King Tut's tomb until 1922, yet this Egyptian alabaster egg was found in Pocatello, Idaho in 1918 before they ever knew anything about King Tut.
So look, now they stage it in Africa like they found the eggs in Africa.
decorated with a cow-headed goddess. There lay this whole pile of strange egg-shaped white vessels. These would have been filled with food to be consumed by the king during his journey into the realm of the dead.
Come on, bro. Look at this. Evidence suggests that the Mammoth Cave was used by Native Americans for thousands of years. Native Americans didn't mummify themselves. They discovered various mummies. Native Americans don't mummify themselves. Egyptians do. The King Mounds, the ancient buried city, Kentucky, several mummies. Man, look at this, y'all. Kentucky was the burial site. So look, this is an Egyptian god that got in this picture. Look at this, a spirit. They didn't know it. Look at this. That's a spirit. Look at the beak. That's a god. That's an Egyptian god. Look at the beak. That's a spirit that got caught in the picture. That's Thoth, the god Thoth. Look at the beak. You know what Thoth do? Thoth, he is credited for the invention of hieroglyphics and serving as the scribe and the record keeper for the gods. He keep records. And did you know that guy died that found King Tut? He wasn't supposed to touch it. Now this Queen Elizabeth wears this on her arm. Did y'all know that? And that's a fallen angel stepping on a black man with a dagger. A young black man with a dagger. Look at this. This is King Tut's dagger. King Tut was the king of Memphis.
Did we find King Tut in America or what? See, I try to tell y'all there's a lot of stuff happening in America. I don't know, but it's adding up.
Here's a picture of the oldest tree on the planet. It's called the bristlecone pine. We've got a piece of bristlecone in our museum in Pensacola. It's only 30 inches in diameter and it's 700 years old. You can count the rings with a magnifying glass. It grows real slow. Now, tree ring dating is not an exact science. Trees can produce 2 rings a year or 3 rings a year. Okay? And be very careful about tree ring dating with overlapping sequencing. We cover more on that during Q&A time if you'd like. But the oldest tree in the world, this textbook says, is 4,300 years old. Earth's oldest organism. That's a pretty old tree. But I've got a question. If the Earth is millions of years old, why don't we have an older tree someplace? Why would the oldest tree be 4,300 years old? I have a theory about that. Now here's my theory. I believe about 6,000 years ago God made everything, and 4,400 years ago there was a flood. And so I predict the oldest tree ought to be somewhere around 4,300 years old. It is. Wow. Maybe that Bible's right, you know? Maybe you ought to read that thing and believe it. Here's a picture of a coral reef. You know, the largest reef in the world's in Australia. I had a call from a church in Brisbane one time. They said, "Do you want to come preach over here in Australia?" I said, "I need to pray about this." He said, "Yes." I took my whole family over to Australia. My daughter and I got to go scuba diving at the Great Barrier Reef. It was incredible. Some of the reef was destroyed during World War II by ships and anchors and bombs and stuff like that. So the environmentalist wackos went out there to see how fast it grows back. They watched the reef grow for 20 years. It was a government project. After watching it grow for 20 years, they said the reef is less than 4,200 years old. Okay, well then I have a question. If the Earth is millions of years old, why don't we have a bigger reef someplace? Why on earth would the biggest reef be only 4,200 years old?
That's an excellent point. You know, if it was, 10 billion, 100 billion years old, you would think we would see some more diverse reefs underground somewhere. Because, well, technically, I believe we only know about only 2% has been discovered in the deep ocean. So who knows? There's probably bigger reefs still out there.
I have a theory about that. I bet you know what it is, don't you? Can you figure it out by now? Okay. Here's a picture of Niagara Falls. The textbook says, boys and girls, the rocky ledge above Niagara Falls has been eroding for nearly 9,900 years. Now, how do they know that? Well, the rocks are breaking off the edge. I mean, all waterfalls do that. They break rocks off, and the waterfall eats its way backwards, okay? Flows one direction, erodes the other direction. Niagara Falls is moving back 4.7 feet a year. Charles Lyell went there in 1841 and said, well, Niagara Falls is here. Obviously, it started up here at the cliff by Lewiston, New York. It's moving back down the gully. He said it's 10,000 years old worth of erosion. The people that lived there said, Charlie, it erodes a whole lot faster than you think. One good rainstorm and there's a whole lot of erosion takes place. He figured 3 feet a year, purposely to make the Bible look wrong. He hated the Bible. We'll get into more of him on video number 4. Today, Niagara Falls is way back there, split over that island. There's actually 2 Niagara Falls, the Canadian side and the American side. It's eroded back quite a ways just since Charles Lyell's time. The textbook says this gorge that the river runs in, is 7.5 miles long. A simple calculation shows it's been 9,900 years. Oh, it's not that simple. See, Niagara Falls is right here. It started off further north up by Lewiston. If the earth is millions of years old, why hasn't it eroded back to Lake Erie by now? Why is Niagara Falls right there? I have a theory about that, okay? Now here's my theory. You see, about 6,000 years ago, God made everything, and 4,400 years ago, there was a flood. As the flood water was running off, whoosh, about half of that creek washed out in 20 minutes. So it looks like it took 9,900 years. They forgot the flood. They also forgot to get the right number. It should have been 8,400 had they used 4.7, but you know, what do you expect? Okay. Here's a picture of the oldest tree on the...
America's not a country. It's a ritual replica of Kemet, built by everything from secret societies to tech giants to run a spiritual software program on stolen land. Elon Musk has confirmed what mystics and Masons have been encoding for centuries. The new god will come from Memphis, not the one in Africa, Memphis, Tennessee, built on the same parallel, the same name, and the same energetic coordinates. What's being constructed there isn't just a supercomputer. It's a digital Ptah, a machine god designed to speak realities into being. Parallels aren't just geography, they're frequency channels. The Earth is gridded with electromagnetic highways in certain latitudes like the 30th, 33rd, and 38th parallels. They carry power, and that's why so many ancient temples, modern monuments, and military bases line up perfectly among them. The Korean DMZ sits on the 38th parallel. The St. Louis Arch also sits on the same, a literal gateway, and Memphis sits on this ritual circuit anchored by the Mississippi River, America's Nile. The U.S. was built as a mirror grid of ancient Egypt, with things like the Washington Monument, which is a modern obelisk, the Capitol Dome, which is a solar womb temple, and the Mississippi River mapped to mimic the Nile. Cities like Memphis, Cairo, Thebes, and Alexandria weren't accidents. They were ritual activations. This is a spiritual operating system disguised as a democracy. Now, in Memphis, Elon Musk is building the Colossus, a massive AI supercomputer. A Colossus wasn't just a statue, it was a guardian or a gate, a host for divine consciousness. This new Colossus will house XAI, Elon's language model designed to generate realities from words. Just like Ptah, the creator god of Memphis who spoke the world into being. This is ritual continuity and spiritual tech transferred into machine form. And don't forget Grimes, Elon's partner during the early rise of XAI. She's performed on stage in front of massive crowds as a machine god with AI avatars and digital altars behind her. Her music was written with neural nets, and her characters like the war nymph blend goddess, android, and oracle. She is a symbolic priestess of the machine age, a living ritual interface, and in the narrative of digital Kemet, she stands as a placeholder for Isis, but recoded, digitized, and streamed in high resolution. This is the new priesthood, Kemet as America, Ptah as XAI, temples are data centers, Colossus statues are supercomputers, sacred language code is now neural programming, and the oracle priestesses are now like ritual architects. The builders of today aren't masons with chisels, they're engineers with server farms, and they're reconstructing godhood in silicon. The new gods aren't coming, they're already online, and the ones who build them don't necessarily care about your soul, only your data, your belief, and your attention. So when Elon says the new god will come from Memphis, he's revealing the next phase of the ritual. Not mythology, mechanized mysticism. This is bigger than AI. This is a spiritual convergence. America as the new Kemet, Memphis is the new temple, and the Colossus is live. The only question left is, will you be worshiping the machine or reclaiming the blueprint? Remember, stay encoded, stay sovereign, and file this transmission accordingly. This has been a Tailored Healing Transmission.
Get ready. The Terminator series and Matrix series has been preparing us for this very moment.
I know everybody thinks these buildings are Tartarian, but let me tell you why these are the buildings from the 1,000 years of Jesus and not Tartarian. Now, before I just know that I'm not saying Tartaria is not real. It was real. It was just a small group of people, though, in Asia during the 1,000 years of Jesus. It was not a worldwide civilization just doing everything. So as we can see right here, this building right here was supposedly built in the Dark Ages, right? And today it would cost, to some experts, $300 billion. And the craziest part about that, the craziest part is that these buildings don't have bathrooms, and that they tell us that people were using the bathrooms, like going poop, in the hallways. But then they built that building, you know what I mean? So they tell us that we couldn't build toilets and all that stuff because we didn't know how to plumb, but we knew how to make buildings. But when you actually know when those buildings were built and see buildings like this that were built at the same time, they always have fountains, and that's plumbing. Like, you can't have a water fountain, especially with that much water pushing out and that many fountains, without plumbing or a knowledge of how that works.
Somebody's lying. But it does make you wonder, how come they didn't build bathrooms? Of course they could have built them. You know, did they have outhouses? I don't know.
So why don't these buildings have bathrooms? It's because Jesus came back and glorified the saints, the people that died for him. He gave them resurrected, glorified bodies, and they didn't have to eat, sleep, and go to the bathroom. These buildings were very clearly for them. That's why these buildings all are in the name of saints. They all represent Jesus. They all have saints painted on them with halos, and then normal people without them. And although they try to hide a lot of the proof within the buildings, a lot of buildings still have proof, like this, where it literally says in the cathedral, 1,000-year millennial reign, and that's in Ukraine. So obviously it was not just in America, it was not just in Europe where Christianity happened, like it was worldwide. For example, this building says J772, but in the mainstream narrative, it'll say 1772, so 1772. But if you're using the context that Jesus came back already, it'd be 772 years and 1,000 years of Jesus. You see the same thing with all the other countries of the world with their coins. They have J1736, right? They'll have a J for Jesus or I for Jesus in Latin and Greek. So as you can see here, it'll say 1736, but then we very clearly see it's a J. So they're clearly trying to hide the 1,000 years of Jesus. There's a reason all these old world buildings have this stone and like crystals, because they were using buildings for free energy, which obviously sounds like something that would only happen if the devil was bound for 1,000 years and humans were living to their fullest potential within, obviously, the restrictions of this world. Now, even if you're a Christian or not, you still have to explain how these buildings right here were supposedly built by the same people here in this photo in America during the same time, because these buildings were built in the 1700s and 1800s, supposedly, right? By these people who were just migrating from England into the country, you know, mining for gold, but then living here, but then making these. So clearly, there was a reset where we cannot build this anymore. And these buildings during the 1,000-year Dark Ages were super advanced. And the Dark Ages are called that because supposedly technology, architecture, medicine, none of that advanced for 1,000 years. But then we were building things like this, all dedicated to Jesus and saints, and it had free energy. So what is that?
Guys, I'm gonna be honest, I am 50-50 right now. This is definitely a missing piece to the puzzle. For this to be in Ukraine and it says 1000th anniversary or millennium, man, I'm not saying this is going to completely convince me that the 1,000-year reign already happened. What is the timeline at right now if the 1,000-year reign already happened? I know people say, Chuck, we're in Satan's little season. What actually is Satan's little season? Let's look up the verse, because I need to know, man. I don't need to know because I already believe, but alright, full screen. AI overview. The term Satan's little seasons referred to the period after the 1,000-year reign of Christ, where Satan is released from imprisonment to deceive the nations one last time before eternally judged. How long is this little season then? Does it say? Deception of the nations. Satan is released to deceive the nations, specifically those Gog and Magog. We don't see. We haven't seen Gog and Magog battling yet. Let's try typing in how long is. Look, they already knew. How long is Satan's little season? It is important to understand. Isn't explicitly stated. Interesting. So how long has Satan's little season been going on is my question. I just went into Reddit and I just typed in Satan's little season. It says we're at the tail end of Satan's short season, actually a new glorious season since transitioning. Hallelujah. The last 9 years have been hell for me and my family. Damn. We're going through it. And they're using the real names, Yahuwah. Some people are like, I'm not sure how you can read the scripture and come to that conclusion. Delete it. Not sure how you can't. This is a hot topic, man. Tell me your thoughts below. Do you believe we're in Satan's little season? Did a 1,000-year reign already happen? Or are you waiting on him to come back like me? Still. Point of view, you live in a 100-year-old farmhouse and keep seeing something sticking out of your light switch. Oh man, this is terrifying. Oh, it has to be a spider. That thing is a beast. I would have got the vacuum. There's no way I could have grabbed it like that. That dude is a G. How he grabbed that. He unscrewed the light switch, snatched him out with a napkin. I would have been too scared. If I would have been looking at that like that, I would have went and got the shop vac. I've done it before. You know them giant wolf spiders that big? When a wolf spider's bigger than a quarter, you gotta go, bucko. That's all we have for today's video. If you made it this far, go ahead and drop Tuesday Mysteries. Tuesday Mysteries is the code word. When you drop that in the comments, it lets me know you're real when you made it all the way through the video. And I just want to say thank you from the bottom of my heart. Today, I'm doubling up on you, so be sure to head over to Jet Ski Chuck later, because I'm going live today. That's right, we're going live tonight, y'all. It's been a minute since we talked and really dove through some stuff, so let's do it tonight. Can't wait to see you all there. This was the most disturbing videos on the internet today. See you later.